This is part 2 of my 2-part series on being tested for VO2 Max and my heart rate training zones. Part 1 was all about the test when you came into the lab with me, and part 2 is the follow-up to that.
You can take this information and apply it to any training program that's available.
You will hear more from him very shortly, and boys, oh boys, does he have lots of great info to share. As I was out here walking, I thought, there is so much I did not know about VO2 Max and heart rate training zones. So much I didn't know. And confession is good for the soul. I started my little adventure with the VO2 Max test with one purpose in mind. I wasn't that concerned or worried, or I just hadn't given a lot of thought to the whole VO2 Max. What I wanted was to validate or find out whether the training zones that I calculated with online calculators and some of my past race numbers, some of my past running numbers, I wanted to find out if they were accurate because they felt off. So not only did I answer that question, but I learned a ton about VO2 Max. I had no idea that VO2 Max is one of the gold standard indicators for longevity, how long we live and how well we live. So I am going to start paying a little more attention to it because the number, for one, was different than what my watch was showing, and my heart rate zones were very different. I am so glad you are here with me. So the interview actually started out a little awkward. Look how guilty I'm sounding.
So have you been able to get out and try any of the data yet?
Well, I haven't tried. Well, I guess yes and no. So, oh dear. But after the awkward start, things got rolling.
My name is Jeff Sahavich, and I am a clinical exercise physiologist. So during the day, I work at Dalhousie as a kinesiology instructor, where I teach anything and everything to do with exercise testing, prescription, exercise physiology, all that good stuff. And then I guess on the side, I have a consulting company, Kinesic Sport Lab. So I've been running that business since I guess 2012, 13. Started as like an actual private exercise physiology lab and training facility where I primarily work with endurance athletes, so running, cycling, cross country, skiing, triathlon, all that good stuff. But then over time, my wife and I decided to pivot, and it became kind of more of a virtual consulting company. But in the more recent years, we decided to kind of come back to in-person, and we do different physiology type tests at Cornerstone Naturopathic Clinic in Upper Tantallon. So that's where we do blood lactate testing and VO2 max tests.
This video turned out to be a little longer than I expected. But no worries, I'm going to show you a shortcut. I've added chapters, and if you don't know what that means, I'm going to show you. I'll just actually demonstrate it on my screen. So this is my channel. And so if you come to any channel on YouTube, doesn't necessarily have to be my channel, you click on a video that you're going to start to watch. And you'll notice here, it gives a little description underneath. And if people, if you're watching a video and they say, see below, they're usually talking about this section. And so this little part here where it says more, you click that. And it gives you the description, and this is where people would include all their links. But what the chapters is right here. And so it will give you the topics. And if you don't want to watch the whole video, as I said, you don't have to watch the whole video, but you should watch the whole video. Just kidding. So if you want to go in this is part 1 of this series, you could go to reaching my end point. That's when we're just kind of getting tired and getting towards the end of the test in the lab. So you click on that. It's at 17 minutes. You just click there. The other option is to click the icons down below in this section for the chapters. I'm told this doesn't appear on all devices, so that's why I'm showing both ways. And so that takes you to that section of the video. It just makes it much easier to navigate through a long video. So see below in this particular video because I have added chapters and you can choose what you want to watch and what you don't want to watch. Of course, I think you should watch the whole thing, but if you don't want to, use the chapters because they're very convenient. Okay, back to the conversation. One part of our discussion talked about the difference between wearables, our watches, for getting our VO2 max numbers compared to testing in the clinical setting.
What we saw was that your VO2 max is 44.1 mils per kg per minute. So that's just the rate of oxygen consumption that your body uses and that's relative to your body weight.
My Garmin had been showing for the last several weeks a VO2 max score of 39 to 40, and in the clinic setting showed 44. So a fairly significant difference. And if you're wondering what the ranges are for various VO2 max fitness scores, and it's broken down by gender and by age, there are lots of charts online. This one is just taken from the Garmin site. I actually wear Garmin, which I love. And so that's the source for this chart.
There's so many different brands, and they all have their kind of built-in algorithm that predicts VO2 or predicts heart rate training zones. Some of them are age related. So as you know, as you start to age, your VO2 unfortunately drops, as well as your max heart rate. So when you were like a little child, your max heart rate was probably over 200. And then as we age, that number becomes lower and lower and lower. And
Over
that's to
200, did you say?
yeah. So I've
Oh my
got
gosh.
three little girls at home, and their heart rates are like they're just like hummingbirds, right? Like they get
Yeah,
excited, they
yeah.
go for a run, they dance, they do ballet, whatever it is, and their heart rate's just through the roof. Um, and some people, like I've tested many people over the years, and some people in their 40s are still able to like get their heart rate at 200 plus. But
Yeah,
that
okay.
whole age predicted formula, so 220 minus your age, you've probably heard
Right.
that before. So
Yep.
that gives you a rough estimate of what your age predicted max heart rate is. But it's once in a blue moon, it hits it right, but
Right.
most part it doesn't. And so when you take that back to a piece of technology that's on your wrist, unless there's some really AI-based machine learning that can interpret like all of your previous workouts, your genetics, your age, your sex, your gender, all that stuff, and then come up with a really well-informed, evidence-based age predicted max heart rate, which that doesn't really
Right.
exist. To train smart and to train kind of at an individualized level, and that doesn't necessarily mean you need a coach by any means. It just means you need to start with some good baseline data
Right.
in
Yep.
terms of what are your training zones and what is your max heart rate, and then we can start to build a program for it, or you can build a program, or even better, you can take this information and apply it to any training program that's available. So yeah, if you
Right.
pick up a program and it says Sunday long slow distance, well, what does slow mean? What does easy
Yep.
mean? What does hard? What's tempo? And that's exactly what we
Yep.
did. We basically just kind of gave a number definition to each of those terms that you can then apply.
Mm-hmm.
Your max heart rate was 175 beats per minute. And so again, take 220 minus your age, and it does
Yeah.
not translate to
No.
175. So it just kind
Right.
of gives you an idea right away where we were.
So, how did my watch compare to calculating my maximum heart rate or tracking my maximum heart rate compared to the clinic data? They were pretty darn close. My Garmin showed 177 as my maximum heart rate during that run. And in the clinic, as you heard him say, it was 175. But I think what cannot happen with a wearable is you know how far you can push yourself. I wouldn't have gotten up to that high because I wouldn't have pushed myself that far. And so I guess that's the advantage of having a true test to get valid baseline data. The good part is that my Garmin kept track, which is great.
So all of that is respective to your body working at maximal effort. That's essentially what we're looking at.
Let's talk about what the heart rate training zones even mean.
Zone 1 through 5 basically replicates an increase in intensity. Zone one is essentially where you'd be doing your warm-up exercises. So if you've ever been to physiotherapy or chiro and they've given you some activation drills, if you've ever been injured, this is the intensity that we'd want you to be doing that type stuff. And
Gotcha.
that could be like just
Oh, okay.
mini band walks, going left and right, jogging, butt kicks, high knees, all that kind of stuff. Zone two is our fat burning zone. That's what we call that VT1, ventilatory threshold one, aerobic threshold. That's where you're optimizing fat utilization or fat burning, if you will. It's also that intensity where your heart is beating slow enough that it can fill completely up and then completely empty. And so think of that in comparison to doing a sprint, like a 30-second sprint where your heart's working
Right.
hard and it's not necessarily giving it full contraction to fill up. So your heart's beating a lot bigger, slower, but still moving a lot of blood in and out. And that's where we start to see these big changes in kind of cardiac function. So a lot of the
Okay.
ultimate goal there is to just really maximize that contraction, filling it and pumping it through. At the same time,
Is it sound like, is it that the zone that kind of really builds the muscle, like or the
yeah,
efficiency of the heart? Yeah. Okay.
exactly. So
Yep.
zone three, and this is an interesting one. This is often considered like garbage miles, junk zone. And
Yeah.
the reason why is because it's too fast to gain the benefits of zone one, or sorry, zone one, zone
Zone
two,
two. Yeah.
and it's too slow to gain the benefits of high intensity sprint work VO2 max. But the
Yeah.
catch is it feels good. So most people will go out and they'll do their long, slow distance in zone three because it feels good. They're getting a little bit of a sweat on, they're breathing a little bit harder. They can't really talk all that efficiently. It's beyond the point of the talk test.
Yeah.
But it also feels good because it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
But here's
It's
the
so
catch.
interesting. Yeah.
They
Go ahead.
primarily do this for weight loss. But if they're not actually burning fat,
Right.
they come home
It's not
from their
going.
run and they're exhausted because they just spent 45 minutes to an hour and a half doing zone three workout. And then they basically destroy their fridge because they're hungry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas if you go do a proper zone two, you come home and you're not really all that hungry.
And nor are you tired. Like that wasn't, so I've
Yeah.
run for 25 years,
Yep.
and this half marathon that I just did, it's the first time I ever did anything with zone two. I didn't even really know about the zones.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
I kept saying to my husband that I have never in my life done a long run and finished still feeling energetic, still feeling good. Because I think all of my other years until January of this year, I would dare guess that I did, just as you say, everything in zone three. Even when
Yeah.
my schedule said long, slow run, tempo run, I think I probably just was hovering around zone three for them all until this past year when I kind of learned about zone two. So this makes
Yeah.
such good sense. Mhm.
The last thing I'll add about zone three is that this is where most injuries happen. And the reason why is because,
Oh,
again, people come out for the purpose of weight loss. They do zone three. They
yeah.
don't get the results they're looking for. So they do more. They do more, 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 and they're not
Hmm.
getting anywhere. So then they get these overuse injuries. Or
Interesting.
likewise, if a training program prescribes VO2 max intervals or any kind of high intensity work, to be honest, that stuff hurts and people don't like doing it. So they do all those workouts in zone three. And then
Yep.
because they haven't built up the strength to be able to do what they want to do on race day, injuries happen. So then zone four would be like your tempo runs. So that would be like your 20 to 30-minute threshold runs, if you will.
Yep.
This is basically what we would consider like speed work, if you will, even though I don't
Yep.
like that term because speed is
No.
like 6 seconds of max effort or less. But when you hear people saying they're going to go do a short, faster run, like continuous
Hmm.
effort, that's where this would happen. Zone five are your intervals. Those just plain hurt. And that could be
Yep.
anywhere from like Again, 5, 6 second sprints all the way up to, let's say, 90 seconds to 3 minutes. So your
Yeah.
VO2 max, which is what we tested, by definition, is the maximum effort you can hold for about 3 minutes. Because if you think about the test that we did, we're going to start the test at 3.5 miles per hour. So this is our warm up. We started with a 4 or 5 minute warm up at a relatively like brisk pace. And then every 3 minutes after that, we increased it by half a mile per hour. So if you went 3.5, you would then jump to 4, 4, 5, 5, 5.5, 6. And I think we actually got you all the way up to 7.5 miles per hour. So
Okay.
your VO2 max is basically the maximum amount of work you can hold for 3 minutes. And
Okay.
how did you feel by the end of that test? Can you go another 30? Whenever you go until you can't go anymore. You're doing great. All right. And
Yeah.
then we dropped you down to I think it was like a 3.0 miles per hour because at that point you were you were done.
I was done. I was done. I felt like I had nothing left in the tank, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you ever come across a training program that says today is VO2 max interval days, it's probably best to do that on a treadmill until you get real comfortable bringing the stuff outside and going to a track. But you would
Yeah.
basically bring the treadmill to 7.5 miles per hour, and you're going to do that for like maybe in the beginning 30 seconds on, and then let's say 90 seconds to 2 minutes of recover, and then repeat back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
And so as you're doing that 30 seconds of work, you're getting a huge influx and dump of lactate into the system. And all these physiological changes are then happening at that level. And it's like, it's hormonal, it's chemical, it's um, like from a physiological standpoint, you're basically ripping your blood tissue supplies open and they're creating new pathways so
Hmm.
that fresh oxygen can then get even deeper into your musculature. And there's value in all of these different zones, but that each one kind of
Right.
comes with its own prescription, right? You'll see a couple of things highlighted here. So VT1, VT2 stands for ventilatory threshold. Or more common, you might hear the terms like aerobic threshold or anaerobic
Hmm.
threshold. So basically, each of those are kind of landmarks, if you will, for the top end of zone two and the bottom or top end of zone four. And so we'll get into what the different training zones are here in a moment. Underneath that, and so we use heart rate to basically describe those or define those. Underneath that, where it says speed, that's measured in miles per hour, and that's just because that was the units that we measured in from the treadmill. So you
Right.
could translate that to kilometers per hour
Hmm.
or minutes per kilometer or minutes per mile, but realistically, it doesn't really matter what the speed is because we're going to work with heart rate.
Right. Right.
And over time, those heart rate numbers will shift, meaning you might go out for a zone two run at 149 beats per minute or less. And over time, your heart will get stronger. And we're still going to maintain 149 beats per minute, but your speed will increase.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
so the idea is that we're not shifting things around based on speed. What's more important is that you're taking kind of into consideration how it feels. Does 149 still feel easy, or
Right.
does it now feel harder?
Okay, let's talk about calories and the different training zones.
And then calories just show how many kilocalories per hour you're essentially consuming or metabolizing or burning at each of those. So you can see
Mhm.
that 168 beats per minute at 6.4 miles per hour actually uses a whole lot more calories in terms of the rate of utilization than VT1. But the important thing to remember is that as intensity increases, so running speed, so does carbohydrate consumption. So
Right.
at the low end, 578 kilocalories per hour, that's actually predominantly being pulled from fat stores,
Fat.
right?
Yeah.
And as we get higher, that's coming more from carbohydrate. So, if your long-term goal or plan, and not speaking to you specifically, but just in
Yeah.
broad terms, if a runner was to start running because they want to lose weight, pulling more of those calories from fat stores is what they ultimately want to do.
So that makes sense about why they say walking, slow running is probably better for weight loss than
Yeah,
am I interpreting that right? Is that what you mean?
exactly. And I guess
Okay.
to add to that, it shouldn't just be solely focused on running either. Obviously, you need to make changes
Right.
in lifestyle and also add in
Yep.
resistance training too. But
Yeah.
ultimately, if your goal is weight loss, you shouldn't be out doing sprints. One, you probably don't have the stamina and fitness built up to be able to do that for very long.
Hmm.
So that's where you want to kind of focus in the early stages on that zone one, zone two, just to get the body moving, up your step count, changes in diet. And then eventually, because using that higher intensity as a tool or high intensity interval training, HIIT training, you've probably heard that acronym.
Yeah.
That's where you can start adding in like your hill climbs or sprints or just the
Right.
shorter duration, higher intensity.
What are some future considerations with this data?
And so basically this data, if you stay consistent with your training, let's say over the next
Hmm.
6 to 8 months and you use these
Hmm.
numbers, there's a possibility that we might actually have to get you retested in like a year's
Okay.
time. And that's a good thing. That means that
Yep.
you've improved. Your physiology has improved. Your resting metrics have changed. And that just means you're becoming more efficient as a human, if that makes sense.
And so do you think even at my age, like I know most people do this that are younger and stuff, so I'm 57.
Yep.
Do you still see that that can change over time with if
Oh,
you are
absolutely.
committed to your training? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you've probably heard before that like if let's say you're an Olympic marathoner or an Olympic athlete, and all your coaches and physiologists and your team trainers, they're working with you to basically squeeze out an extra 1% of performance, right? Because
Okay.
you've been
Yeah.
training at your highest peak level of conditioning for the last, let's say, 3 or 4 Olympic cycles. So basically like
Yeah.
8 to 12 years. And if we can squeeze out an extra 1% performance, that's huge. That's the difference
Right.
between like
Yeah.
a fourth place and a gold medal. But for the recreational athletes like you and I,
Hmm.
we're not chasing 1%. We're looking at like 25 to 30%
Oh,
improvement. And that
okay.
can happen pretty darn quick through small changes in nutrition, sleep recovery, and training, right? If you've been kind of doing a lot of your individualized training based on guesstimates and predictions,
Right.
now we have dialed in data that's
Right.
specific to you, and they're
Yep.
like the sky's the limit in terms of how much improvement we can make right now.
Great. Well, that's
Yeah.
encouraging.
Yeah. And to add to that, so this was the comment that you made, you're already sitting at 98% superior, and
I
that's
know. I love
reflective.
that number.
Yeah. So that's reflective again, taking you as a 57-year-old woman
Yeah.
who is active and comparing that to kind of the population database. So
Okay.
even though you might not necessarily think or feel like you're an elite athlete, in comparison to other 57-year-old women,
Hmm.
you're crushing it. You're at 98% superior. You should get that branded, like tattooed somewhere.
I said when you first said this to me, just for viewers who may be watching this a little bit later, my first comment was, "I'm snipping that off and putting it as my Facebook profile because I was so excited."
Absolutely.
Let's talk a bit more about lactate buildup.
The great thing about doing a direct VO2 max test is that I don't actually need to stick your, I've got to cut my finger over the weekend. But if I was to
Oh,
prick your finger and take a little bit of blood and we actually measured
right.
the blood lactate, so that's basically the measure of the acidity of the hydrogen ions in your blood, right? So blood
Yep.
lactate, lactic
Yep.
acid is essentially what we're measuring. At the low intensity, that lactate accumulation is pretty low. At the high end, the accumulation is quite high, and meaning that we're producing
Right.
we're also kind of recycling back in the system. So at the low intensity, it's slow and low enough that what we produce, we can actually just dump it back into the system, break it down, and then it just kind of reproduces. Lactate's not necessarily a bad thing. It's how our body just functions and reproduces and dumps it back in for energy production. But as we start to increase, that accumulation starts to happen and sticks around a little bit longer. And that's actually what can cause us to slow down or require more rest. And so in zone 3, we have a little bit of accumulation. So the moment you start to
Right.
get that accumulation, you're no longer getting the training benefits that come from zone 2. So that's why we need to slow it down and keep the lactate out of the system if that's
Mhm.
not our ultimate training goal.
All of these zones have their purpose, and it depends on what your goal is and what you're working towards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
So
Yeah.
training smart just means that you understand what each of these zones involves, requires, what the training benefits are, and then basically then using this information.
A huge realization for me about training smart and what some of my training issues have been. I know where now my weakness has been in my training that I'm realizing it's not where I thought I was, but I was always scared. And I think I said to you when we were doing that, I was scared. I had 160 in my head, not to go over. When my heart rate goes over 160, slow down because I'm too old to get in that range. And so this is going to be a hard
Oh yeah.
transition for me because it's going to feel like it's gonna be tough, but this is so good. This is so valuable.
And
Yeah.
so unless you have some kind of predisposed
Right.
clinical
Obviously, yeah.
condition, or you've
Right.
had some sort of like myocardial episode, like a heart attack, yes, there should be some caps and limits. And that's why we
Yeah.
do stress tests in the hospital to figure out
Yep.
what is your capacity.
Let's compare my heart rate training zones before I took the test and what I used to train versus after the test and what I'll use going forward.
But this is what is the most important piece.
Yeah.
So these are the terms that I use. It's the exact same as what we just kind of went through.
Okay.
There's a little more definition. Even though it looks like there's 6 training zones, it's like peak aerobic speed is basically just your max heart rate. So
Okay.
critical 166 to 175, if you will. I always put a plus sign in there because who knows? Maybe we can come back in a year, retest, and your new
Hmm.
max rate's 178, right?
Right. Yeah.
We just took a snapshot of that particular day.
Right.
And
And
so
if you're not training regularly, it could go down as well, right? I mean, because
absolutely.
we
Yep.
did my test just after I finished the half marathon. So I was probably well trained. I was probably
Yep.
done a lot of training. So yeah, it is good to think about repeating as time goes by because
Yeah.
it could go
Or
up or down.
likewise, if we had have tested too close to race day and you were still carrying residual fatigue, that
Oh,
might
okay.
impede your results as well, right? That's the
Oh,
importance of
okay. Yeah.
rest and recovery built into your training program.
Right, right. Yeah.
Okay, so for you, active recovery is between 134 and 141 beats per minute. So prior to this testing, when you were doing your zone 2 workouts, what heart
Yeah.
rate zone or what was your slow heart rate that you were running with?
So zone 1 was 106 to 119.
Okay,
Dr. Just's reaction cracks me up.
that's like
Yeah, it's a big
barely walking,
difference.
barely walking.
Yeah, and so zone 2, which is what I was trying to do my long runs on,
Yep.
was 119 to 1 I have 131.5 is what I had calculated out.
Oh gosh, you weren't even in zone 1, so you were barely moving.
Well, and that's my videos that I put on that's exactly what I said. Yeah, I don't feel tired at all, but I mean, I am going at a snail's pace. At the end of my run, I said, I was so bored. I felt like and my sister-in-law joked with me one time when I was telling her how long it took me to go a certain distance. She said, I think I can walk faster than that. And I said, I'm not kidding you. I was going so slow. So
And
this just makes so much more sense.
so and just to add to it too, it's not a horrible thing that you spent that much time doing it. If we look at what happens between 4.0 and 4.5 miles per hour, we see a little bit of a shift here in terms of VO2 and a little bit of a shift in heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we go from 4.5 to 5, we see a big jump,
Right.
right? So what
Yep.
that tells me is that your aerobic capacity, like with all this slow stuff you were doing, it made
Mm-hmm.
a huge impact, but we've still got more room to go. So
Yep.
142 to 149, I recognize that's a pretty small range. So if you feel that 142 is too hard, we could actually kind of extend that down a little bit. Do you know what I mean? So there is room to kind of play with it. So what I would recommend is go do a couple of longer runs.
Mm-hmm.
And how does it feel? What is that RPE between 142 and
Right.
149? And if it's like a 14 or a 15 at a 20, then
That's
that's not
too high.
necessarily, yeah, like you should
Yeah.
still be able to talk. That's the most
Right.
important, right?
Yeah. And that to see, I'm so interested. I'll go back through my own videos because I record the video after every single training run I did. And I
Yep.
would often say, and I'd show my heart rate and stuff. And if memory serves me correctly, and I will have to go back, I think I often said, I feel like my zone two is around 140, 142 is when I'm feeling comfortable. It felt good. And I do think the 143 or whatever it was for the heart rate is probably a little high for zone two for me. I'm starting to think around 139 feels like where I should be for zone two. I think these numbers are going to be very, very close to what I've been thinking. So
And they
yeah.
should because it's
Yeah.
based on what we measured.
Right.
All I'm doing is just interpreting data that we collected. And so
Okay.
one of my mentors always told me too is don't present data that wasn't collected. So I'm not making any real
Oh,
interpretation,
interesting.
right?
Yeah.
And so even
Yeah.
things like treadmill speed, miles per hour, like this was what we collected. If
Right.
I was to go and translate this to like minutes per kilometer, it doesn't really translate because we did this inside on a treadmill by pushing buttons. The
Yep.
moment you focus on speed outside, you have to take into account grade, elevation changes, wind.
Right. Right.
So that's where
Right.
the emphasis comes back to heart rate because as that hill starts to increase,
Yes.
you're going to have a heart
Yeah.
rate response. So if I'm giving you a prescribed like speed or train or do you know what I mean? Like the pace just
Yep.
doesn't like translate all the time.
Although we've referenced some of these numbers, I just thought I'd put a quick table up with my before and after zones. Quite a difference.
So again, as we start to increase in intensity, those training zones, like they kind of stay consistent, roughly like 7 to 8 beats per minute. And
Yeah.
so when you get from like there's a big difference between a 145, let's say, and a
Mm-hmm.
155. 155 might feel more comfortable because again, it feels like you're going for a run, you're sweating a bit,
Right. Yeah.
you're breathing heavy, but it's too hard.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's too easy to get the benefits of the higher stuff.
Right.
So spend minimal time in zone three unless your ultimate goal is to get better at doing zone four. And if zone four feels too hard in the beginning, then do zone three.
Mm-hmm.
But if
And
zone
that,
three
yeah.
feels like better than zone two, then don't do that. Go to zone.
Right. Yeah. And that I may have to do a little bit of that zone three because for so long, well, really since I've been over 50,
Yeah.
that whole going over 160
Yeah.
as I usually would stop. I would walk or whatever. And so this is going to, I'm going to really have to put, so I expect zone four and zone five will be tough for me to work into
Yeah.
my training. And so, but I can't wait to do that.
What I would
Okay.
love to do if I retest you in a year's time, let's say,
Yeah.
what I would love to see, and can you see my mouse here? I'm
Yep,
moving
I
around.
can. Hmm.
So if we were to retest in a year, I would love to see this VO2 go like this
Oh,
and then
okay.
start to take off and then start to take off and then really go. But at the same time, I
Oh, I
also love
see.
to see that whole thing shift to the right. So let's say it starts at 4.5 and basically
Yep.
makes that same move. That's what we ultimately want to see.
Okay.
And at the same time, our heart rate response, we would love to see the exact same shape, but lower and to
Right.
the right.
Yes. And so
And
the
so
VO2, why you want that to shift is because again, that's how you're using your oxygen, like what so you that shouldn't be reached to a stressful point until later on, like
you
the
got it.
better you the higher fitness level you are.
Yep. And if you're familiar
That
with the name
yeah,
Dr. Peter Attia,
yeah, yeah,
he's the longevity guy, and he
yeah.
basically says that what you want to do in life is extend your actual VO2 measure. You want your VO2 to be higher than your age for as long as possible.
Oh. Ooh, I have
And
some work to do. Okay.
well, and so to be fair, you're already at that 98%, but that
Yeah.
just shows that your
Yeah.
VO2 actually decreases over time,
Yes. Yeah.
right? But
Okay.
for maybe some of your younger listeners,
Yep.
having their VO2, knowing their VO2 with respect to their age. So let's say you're a 43-year-old male,
Hmm.
the longer you can have your VO2 above your age is a really, really good thing. And at some point, it's not attainable, but
Right.
that should be your goal for your younger athlete.
Oh,
And if
so
their VO2
interesting.
is not where their age is, um, they've got some work to do for sure.
Yeah.
But like your VO2 max is essentially one of the strongest predictors of quality of life later in life.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
it's not just a screenshot or a snapshot of today, it's actually a snapshot of all the work you have done for the last like 3 months, 3 years,
Right.
9 years, 12 years, blah, 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 right?
Okay.
And it is
Okay.
modifiable, but it takes time. It's not like just going to go to the gym and do bicep curls. Like you actually have to put the time in.
Yeah. So what now? Let's talk about how we move forward with a plan.
How are we going to see that shift down and to the right? We have to put in more quality time doing zone two workouts. And so
Mhm.
where are you right now in terms of like distance or time? Like what's a Sunday long run look for you right now?
This is the worst time for me for running. I am not a good runner in heat. And so,
Yep.
but I just said to my husband the other day, I said, I really want to through the summer see if I can at least maintain like doing the 10-kilometer thing
Yeah.
for my long run, before I start to kind of train for something else.
Yep.
And so, yeah, that's where I am. And I'm like, I've cut back. I'm probably running 3, maybe 4 times a week, but then I do an exercise class in between there and walk on
Okay.
another day and
So
stuff.
I'm going to give you a high level prescription. If you're running
Okay.
3 times a week, what I would
Yep.
love for you to do is continue to do one long run a week.
Yeah.
And that could be anywhere from like 45 to 75 minutes. So 45 minutes to an hour 15.
Yep.
And that's going to be strictly zone two.
Yeah. Okay.
If you've got the capacity to do a zone four workout, so that's steady state, and that could be like anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, maybe even starting off 15 minutes with a proper warm up, cool down at the beginning and end.
Okay.
So zone four is your anaerobic threshold. And in the case that you don't have the ability to get to 159, 165 and hold it there,
Mm-hmm.
then that's where you can push that sub threshold, that zone three.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So that would be your second run.
Yeah.
The third, do you have any hills in and around your where you live in
Oh,
your?
we have lots of hills.
Yep. So think of that as a strength building session. And it
Okay.
doesn't even matter what speed you're working on. Just try to keep proper form. So shoulders,
Yeah.
chest, you're not slouched over, but you're keeping
Yeah.
everything up. And you're just going up and down, up and down. And what I like to do is to accumulate, like in the beginning, 10 minutes of uptime. Doesn't matter how many reps you're doing, but at the
Okay.
bottom of the hill, you press start, run up. And then
Yeah.
on the down, you press stop. So you're only counting the
Oh, I
time.
see. You're only right. Okay. Yes. Okay.
And your heart
That
rate
makes
could
good.
very well end up being in zone 4 or 3, but it doesn't matter because the focus isn't on heart rate. It's just building strength.
Okay. And that is important for me to know because although I love everything I've done with the learning about the heart rate zones and using that to train, I've become a little obsessed with watching my heart rate, which I've never done in all my years of running. So it's
It's
good
good
for,
to still record that data because
oh,
then you
for
can
sure. Yep.
improvements over time. But
Yep.
check the heart rate conversation at the door for this particular workout.
Okay. So today I thought I would try the 10 minutes of uphill. Holy sweet potato. I thought at first when he said that, I was kind of feeling a little arrogant and I was thinking, oh, well, that's not going to be hard. I run hills all the time. I just ran the longest hill. That big long stretch that I thought would be 10 minutes was only 5 minutes of uphill. So I'm going to the bottom. I will run to the bottom except for this video recording part and run back up.
And then your last workout, if time permits,
Yeah.
is going to be a zone 5 workout intervals.
Oh,
And
okay.
so what I would start with is again, proper warm up, proper cool down, and all that stuff usually takes place in zone 1,
Yep.
right?
Oh, zone one. Okay. Yep.
So if you know like your A skip, B skip, or C skips, that's like high knees, butt kicks kind of
Yep.
thing. Look
Yep.
those up on YouTube if you're not familiar with them.
I've been
But
watching
just
Andrew Huberman and his
oh, good. Yeah, the
skipping
Huberman
and
lab. Good.
yeah,
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 good
yeah.
stuff. Is starting with like again 15 to 30 seconds on, if you will, and
Okay.
then adding about like 90 seconds rest. So if you were doing 30 seconds on, 90 seconds off, that's a
Yeah.
1 to 3 work to rest ratio. But your
Okay.
ultimate goal is building towards 3 minutes on
Oh
a,
my.
a
Okay.
VO2 max interval, right?
Okay.
So
Right.
that's your ultimate goal is to be able to do 3 minutes on and then 3 minutes recovery. 3 minutes on, 3 minutes recovery. That's your 1 to 1 work to rest ratio.
Okay.
But starting off, we might have to do a 1 to 3 work to rest ratio.
Right.
30 seconds on, 90 seconds off. And if you feel that 90 seconds recovery just isn't enough, or if 30 seconds of work is too much, just
Yeah.
play with that work to rest ratio. 15 seconds on, maybe 2 minutes off. The idea, though, is that you're not necessarily looking to be completely fresh at the start of the next interval. Just do it somewhere safe because
Yeah.
if you like trip or whatever, you don't want to,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So those are your 4 workouts. You've got a long one, you've got a shorter, faster one, you've got a hill one, and then you've got your dedicated speed workout.
So only one of those is at zone 2,
Yeah.
that long run. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
see, this is going to
It,
be pushing me. This is,
and in the beginning, if you don't necessarily have the capacity to do like one or like those 4, and you
mm-hmm.
feel like, you know what, that last workout really crushed me, then do 2 long, slow distance workouts. This is
Right.
kind of the
Yep.
beauty because right now you're not necessarily training for any event.
Mm-hmm.
If you were training for a marathon or another half marathon, absolutely. It's going to take some time to
Right.
build
Yep.
up that stamina. So that's where you would
Yep.
want to be doing 2 workouts of long, slow aerobic capacity. But
Yep.
because we're just kind of doing general fitness, general maintenance, health wise, you can afford
Mm-hmm.
to do all 4. And technically it's your off season. So like
Yep.
prioritize that hill strength workout.
Okay, I'm excited to give this a try. And it is going to be a complete shift for me because
Yeah.
in my head, I've been stopping when the watch showed me 160. Okay. I'm trying to catch my breath here. This has been fabulous, and I'm excited to start to change my training a little bit and see where this takes me. Like I thought maybe
Yeah.
this last Blue Nose would be my last half marathon, but maybe I'll have to do another one just to see how things turn turn
Yeah,
out.
and who knows, you
Yeah,
might like build some strength, build some more
yeah,
capacity,
yeah,
and throw the goal down of running a marathon.
yeah, yeah. And I've never really had any desire to run a marathon, but maybe a full marathon. But then I thought if I could increase my time on the half marathon, that would
Yeah,
be exciting too. So, yeah.
absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for
You're
doing this, and thank
so
you for
welcome.
allowing me to record it.
Yeah.
This has really been wonderful, and I hope that I can get it all into a nice little short little video and
Well, and
just pick
send
out
me.
some.
I'd love to see the finished
Yeah,
product, and
yeah.
I'll have to look up because I'm sure I can just search and find your channel and just see some of the stuff.
Oh my God, they're really bad. It's called Lead, Lead, Lead Your Living. And
All
so
right.
it's not all about running. It's just my last section has been about a 10-week training series or whatever. But
Cool.
oh yeah, yeah, it's bad. It's all there. The good, the bad, the ugly.
All right.
All
Well, you
right.
go, and we'll keep me posted. We'll stay
Okay.
connected.
A huge thank you.
You're
Thanks.
very welcome. Bye.
Okay. See you. Just remember, you're in charge of your own health. Always check with your primary care provider before starting a new initiative. You want to do this in the safest way possible. And most importantly, just keep moving. It is so important for us. Remember, this is not advice, this is for education purposes only.